Well, Shabbat Shalom. This is the Bible study video, and if you're watching it, then hopefully you're watching it before 11 a.m. on Sabbath, because at 11 a.m. we'll be doing a live video, and in that live video we will be discussing this one. If perchance you haven't seen the live video, then or seen the link to the live video or the notification of it, and you're watching this, then maybe it hasn't happened yet. If it's after 11 a.m., then go to Shalom Ministries, and you should be able to find the live video there and join in on the conversation. It is, for me, it's Thursday. It's not Sabbath yet. We are preparing for Sabbath. Excuse me while I adjust my camera here. It was wonky. There, nope, it's still a little wonky. I like it be... Maybe I'm OCD, but I like my camera to be straight. Anyway, this video, we're going to be covering 2 Corinthians chapter 10. We're going to start in verse 10, where we left off last week, and we're going to read down probably, I would like to read down to 15, but I'm not sure we're going to make it that far. It seems like there's a division after 12, where there's one subject between 10 and 12, and then there's another subject after that. But we'll see where we make it to. Maybe we'll make it a little bit farther than 15. That being said, we've got a Bible study out of 2 Corinthians chapter 10, starting in verse 10, and hopefully we make it down to verse 15 or thereabouts. We're going to read this section to catch you up on what's going on. I'll give you a little preamble, if you will, or prelude or something. You know, it won't be an epilogue because that comes afterwards, so it's whatever comes before. But I'll get you caught up, and then we'll talk about these verses. Before we get started, though, I'd like to open up in a word of prayer, and then we will dive right into it. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we come to you and we thank you for giving us the opportunity to have a Bible study online. I pray that you would continue to bless this ministry, continue to allow it to reach people, and I pray that the people it reaches experience some benefit from watching these videos and having these discussions. More than anything else, my desire is to see people grow and to grow myself. All this I ask, in the name of Yahushua Messiah, amen. So, 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 10, it says, "For his letters, they say, are weighty and powerful, but his bodily presence is weak, and his speech contemptible. Let such a one think this, that such as we are in word by letters, when we are absent, such will we be also indeed when we are present. For we dare not make ourselves of the number or compare ourselves with some that commend themselves, but they measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves are not wise." We're going to pause there because, like I said, verse 12 kind of ends the subject. So let's talk about these verses. So what Paul is doing is he is kind of quoting in a supposition kind of way of what the people that are criticizing his philosophy, technique, or whatever, he's quoting or you know, I don't know if it's really a quote. I mean, he didn't hear them say it, but he is he's approximating what must have been said based on what he's heard. And so he says that they say, in verse 10, he says, "For his letters, they say." So if I was to put this the way we talk, we'd say, I suppose they might say, "His letters are weighty and powerful, but his bodily presence is weak and his speech contemptible." We talked about this a little bit last week. This is what he supposes that they're saying about him based on the information that he's gotten about what people have said about what they've said. That gets kind of confusing. So there's people, they're in Corinth, they're saying things about Paul, they're not very flattering, they're kind of accusatory, and they jump to a bunch of conclusions that just aren't accurate. And in so doing, it gets back to Paul, and Paul is saying, here's what they're saying. Basically, here's what they're saying. I suppose what they might be saying is that my letters are powerful and mighty, and they attack the problems, but when I'm there, I'm just kind of weak, and I'm not really assertive. He goes on to speculate what they might be saying. Verse 11, he says, "Let such a one think this, such a one as who? Such a one as Paul. Let such a one think this, that which as we are in word by letters, let such one think this, that such as we are in word by letters, when we are absent, such will we be also indeed when we are present. So he says that these people are saying, the kind of people that we are is that we're the same person whether we write the letter or whether we're in person. And this is what they're claiming about themselves, that Paul supposes they must be claiming about themselves in comparison to what they claim about him. What they claim about him is in his letters, he's super powerful, but when he shows up, he's a different person. He's kind of weak and not as assertive. He goes, but we're not that way. No, we are aggressive. Either way, whatever we have to say in a letter, we can say in person. And we've heard people say these things. Whatever I'm telling you, that's what I'll tell them to their face. And if you know anything about people and those kind of conversations, 9 times out of 10, when somebody says, I don't care, I would tell this to their face. I don't care. Whatever I say to you, I would say to their face. 9 times out of 10, they don't. They wouldn't. They are not the kind of person that would ever confront somebody to their face. They're sweet as sugar when they're in your face, and they are as sharp as a knife when they're behind your back. And he's kind of making that implication here, that these people are accusing him of being a different person in person than he was in his letters, and they're saying that they wouldn't be that way. He says, for we dare not make ourselves of the number or compare ourselves with some that commend themselves. So this is another thing they're saying. We are not the kind of person that compare ourselves with those that are constantly commending themselves, that are constantly talking about their ministry, their duties, their authority. He says he's saying that they come out, they're like we're the same person in public or in the letters, we are in person, we're the same people all the time, and we don't compare ourselves to those that present themselves as being important. We don't compare ourselves. So we're not going to compare ourselves to Paul. They go on to say, or Paul goes on to say in verse 12, but measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves are not wise. So Paul's saying, here's what they say. They say about me that I say powerful things in my letters, but I'm a weakling when it comes to being in person. I'm not assertive enough. They say about themselves that they're not that kind of person. That whatever they have to say behind your back, they're going to say it to your face. Whatever they have to say in a letter, they're going to say it in your presence. And then they say that they don't compare themselves to people like me who have authority. They compare themselves to themselves. And he says, and in that they are not wise. Why are we not wise? Well, the fact is that there are people out there better than me. And there are people out there better than you. And when I say better, I mean more righteous, more faithful in their walk, that are better at obedience. You are not the tip of the spear, and I am not either. Maybe you are better in some areas. Maybe you are fantastic at keeping the Sabbath, not so good at telling the truth. Something like that. Well, there's people out there that do things that are succeeding where you fail. There are people out there that have been given authority, more authority than you or I have been given. And believing that and understanding that is a good sign to help us to understand who we are in this kingdom and the areas that we need to work on, the areas that we need to improve. And if I compare my faithfulness to somebody who is more faithful, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to think, hey, I've got some work that I need to do. I need to set higher goals for myself. On the other hand, if I compare my faithfulness to my faithfulness, if I look at me and I say, hey, am I doing okay? What am I going to compare me to? Well, I'm going to compare me to me. Look, here is where I am, and here is what I'm going to compare myself to. Wow, I'm at the very tippity top of the level there. If I look at myself, then I'm going to find that I'm okay. If I compare myself to myself, then I'm going to think that everything I'm doing is good and right and okay. But on the other hand, if I compare myself to those that have been given authority in certain areas, if I compare myself to those whose faith outstrips mine, or whose honesty is better than mine, or whose ability to keep Shabbat is better than mine, if I compare myself to those that are more righteous in any one area or in all areas than I am, then I'm going to come up short, and I'm going to see that I'm coming up short, and I'll need to make adjustments in order to meet whatever standard I have for myself and Yahweh has for me as well. And Paul is basically implying here, without actually saying it, that Yahweh's placed Paul in the lives of the people at Corinth in order for them to be able to have something to shoot for. Paul is not outside of that fault. He realizes that there's authority over him. He constantly refers to the authority of the Messiah over him and how his desire is to be like the Messiah. And so Paul is not comparing himself to himself. He's not comparing himself even to the other apostles so much as he is just striving to be more and more like the Messiah. He is shooting for the goal of perfection, and he will achieve at least some level of excellence in that. If he was trying to be just better than the people of Corinth, then he would already have stopped. He wouldn't care about righteousness anymore because he would think that he was already better than the people of Corinth. The problem with comparing ourselves to the wrong measurement tool is that we will always fall short of whatever measurement tool we compare ourselves to. If you compare yourself to yourself, then you're not quite as good as you think you are, and that way you'll always fall short of that level that you think you're at. If you compare yourself to a biblical teacher, a wise person, somebody who is righteous or successful in areas that you're not, then you can grow as a person. You can grow in those areas or grow as a person in general. We have to set goals that are higher than us. And Paul is saying that the people that are kind of backbiting and gossiping about him and undermining his ministry, that those people, their biggest problem is that they have no higher authority than themselves. And when you have no higher authority than yourself, then you think you're the tip of the spear, the top of the pyramid. You think you're the tippity-toppity bestest of the best. And when somebody shows up and they're doing things completely different than you, even if they appear to be more righteous, you're going to question whether they're doing it right. And you're going to criticize everything they're doing, much like they're doing to Paul in this situation. And that's why Paul's addressing it. He's not addressing it because his feelings are hurt. He's not addressing it because somehow he's indignant at the words that they said mean about him. He's addressing it because this is a spiritual problem for those that are criticizing him. The reason it's a spiritual problem for them is they think that they're perfect and then everybody else is falling short. And instead of recognizing Paul's authority and his desire for righteousness and his discipleship of the Messiah, all they see in him is somebody who does things differently, so he must be wrong. They're wrong. They're not wise. And that's why he says they're not wise. He says comparing themselves among themselves are not wise. They are not wise. Sorry about the yawn there. In verse 13 he says, "But we will not boast of things without our measure, but according to the measure of the rule which Elohim hath distributed to us, a measure to reach even unto you. For we stretch not ourselves beyond our measure, as though we reach not unto you. For we are come as far as to you also in the preaching of the good news of the Messiah, not boasting of things without our measure, that is, of other men's labors, but having hope, when your faith is increased, that we shall be enlarged by you according to our rule abundantly." So he goes on to say, talking about comparing, he goes on to say, "But we will not boast of things without our measure." In other words, we're not going to boast of things that are not things that we accomplished. We're not going to boast about, we're not going to claim credit for the things that happen with, as a result of our ministry that we don't do. A good example of that would be the people at Corinth are generous. He's already addressed that. He's boasted about them and their generosity. He didn't say, look at how good of a leader I am, that these guys finally got that right. Wow, I'm awesome. That's not what he's saying. He's not patting himself on the back for their accomplishments, for their strides in the right direction. He's not patting himself on the back for their victories. He's patting himself on the back, if you will, for the things that he's accomplished. He is the one that is going from place to place. He accepts responsibility and the authority that was given to him for that. It's within the measure of grace and faith that he was given by the Messiah and Yahweh. So he is boasting in a sense, not in a braggartly way, but boasting in the accomplishments that Yahweh has delivered to him, the victories that he has experienced. He's not bragging about the victories that other people have experienced, even if he had a hand in them. And I feel like that may be a difference between himself and the people that are criticizing him there at Corinth. He doesn't really lay anything at their feet here, but the impression that we get is the people in Corinth, they measure themselves by themselves. They think they're pretty awesome. They're claiming authority they don't have, and they claim the victories within the body of believers in Corinth, even though they really didn't even have a hand in it, because they're already okay. And so they probably feel like their presence and their influence in this congregation is more powerful than Paul's, because while they're addressing problems while they're physically there, where Paul doesn't do that. He does it in a letter. So they're saying, we don't have to send a letter. We can say these things while we're here. Unfortunately, I'm getting the impression that they're not saying things that people need to hear. They're leading people astray. And Paul is pointing out that his ministry is not a ministry in which he takes credit for what other people do. His ministry is a ministry in which he does the things that he needs to do in obedience to Yahweh. And he doesn't talk about the things that other people accomplish. He talks about the things that is accomplished within his own ministry by Yahweh. And so there's a huge dynamic difference between one set of people that have authority over this congregation, being Paul and his team, and the other set of people who feel they have authority but really probably don't, and are just they establish their authority by bad mouthing the actual people who have authority and trying to distract away from that authority and the instructions that they give. And so I think Paul's addressing that. And if you're a part of a congregation, part of a fellowship, then you can fall on two sides of this line that Paul is drawing. You can be mindful of the things that you were called to do and make sure those things are accomplished, and compare yourselves to those that are more righteous and more successful in their walk than you have been thus far. Or you can compare yourself to yourself, think that you're pretty important, and try to lead people that you probably have no business leading. When I first came into Torah, we were at a Baptist church, and we quickly went from there to a different congregation that was Torah observant, that used to be a Baptist church, and we started leading that fellowship, and it was going very well. And then this lady shows up, and she needs help, and we helped her out, and she started coming to the fellowship, which was a huge blessing. You know, we like to see when we're an influence in people's lives that they respond by changing their desires, their affections towards Yahweh and walking in his ways. And so when these people started coming, we were like, that's great. But over time, what we noticed was at this fellowship that there was an undercurrent that was constantly working against any efforts that we made in the ministry. Like, we would try to have a Sukkot, and there was always this tension that seemed to run against all the things that we were trying to do. We would have feast day celebrations, we'd have just regular Sabbath activities, and there was always this undercurrent that seemed to be slowing down any progress that we were making in the direction that Yahweh wanted us to go. And we didn't really realize what it was until we heard through some of the people in our congregation that somebody was going around and talking about how they were going to take the ministry away from me and take it over themselves. And it was a woman, and she did her dead level best to undermine the ministry that I was leading. And I didn't fight with her. I was like, as soon as I figured out what was going on, I didn't even know how to deal with it. I'd never seen anything like this before. And so I just prayed about it, and I left it in Yahweh's hands. And it didn't take very long, maybe about a year of them coming, before they realized that those things, the congregation wasn't going to change. It wasn't because I was fighting her and winning. It was just because I got up, I preached as close approximation to the truth as I could deliver. I taught, I discipled people. I rose up men within the congregation to help lead the congregation. I did all the things that I feel like Yahweh was asking me to do, and I did it in a way that I felt like was the right way to respond to everything. And ultimately, the woman got mad and she left, and one of the women got mad and left. There was another woman too, and eventually she got mad and she left. It was after we had already moved out here to Missouri, but there are times that there are people within any group or congregation that are more concerned with promoting themselves and denigrating the people around them that actually have authority and are speaking the truth. I think that their desire is to be a minister of the gospel. I think that's that woman's desire, was to be a minister of the gospel. But I think that within that desire, she wanted to be the most important person. The problem is if the gospel you're ministering isn't the gospel of Scripture, then it is not the gospel at all. And Yahweh won't bless that. Ultimately, the issue did take care of itself. And I have a feeling here that Paul's response to that situation is probably going to take care of that issue that he's having at Corinth. But anyway, what Paul is saying here is that he was given a certain amount of authority and a certain amount of calling. There's a calling on his life to go to certain places and do certain things. And that's all within the measure of the authority that he was given. And he operates within the measure of that authority. He goes on to say that measure extends to Corinth. And if the measure didn't extend to Corinth, then he wouldn't have went there. I mean, he says this, he says, for we stretch not ourselves beyond our measure, as though we reach not unto you. In other words, we didn't reach out past the authority that Yahweh gave us when we reached unto you. I did have that authority. I was following the instructions, the calling of Yahweh when I came to you. And if somebody else feels like that they have authority and that we don't, then what they're really questioning isn't me. They're not questioning my ministry. They're questioning the calling of Yahweh. And that doesn't work out so good. I mean, the sons of Korah challenged Moses and Aaron when in the wilderness and questioned his authority. And Yahweh had clearly given his authority to Moses and Aaron. And the sons of Korah felt like that they should also have a portion of that authority, or even all of it. And the ground opened up and swallowed them, and they died. Yahweh doesn't like it when we question the authorities he's placed over us. He doesn't like it when we try to usurp authority from the men and women that Yahweh has called to place over us. And I'm not telling you that I'm Moses and that my authority is absolute or anything like that. I've heard pastors do that too. Moses didn't have to do that. I certainly don't either. Yahweh's authority is strong enough to speak for itself. As in the situation here with Paul, he's saying that, he says in verse 13, for we will not boast of things without our measure. We're not gonna brag about things that we didn't accomplish, that aren't our calling, that wasn't our authority. But according to the measure of rule, the measure of authority, which Yahweh, which Elohim hath distributed to us, a measure to reach even unto you. For we stretch not ourselves beyond our measure, as though we reach not unto you. For we are come as far to you also in the preaching of the good news of Messiah. not boasting of things without our measure, that is, of other men's labors, but having hope that your faith is increased, that we shall be enlarged by you according to our rule abundantly. So he says we don't brag about things that other people do, the work of other people's labor. We don't brag about y'all's labor and the things that you guys have accomplished. We're real proud of you. It's great. We don't do this so we can talk about how great Corinth is doing and look at the great job we did in steering you guys out of the pits of hell into the righteous life. He goes, I don't need to do that. I don't need to go around telling people, pointing at the things that you have accomplished and claiming them as my accomplishments. I don't need to do that. And we don't need to do that. Yahweh is more than capable of lifting us up and blessing us and giving us whatever authorities and whatever measure of grace in the gospel that he wants us to have. We don't need to tear anybody else down or claim other people's works in order to do that. He says we don't need to do that. He goes, we're not doing this so we can bring you the gospel and claim all of your labors as our own. We're doing this so by enlarging you, it enlarges us. It makes the us being the body of believers. By bringing you into a more righteous walk, it brings everybody into a place of betterment. Why is that? Well, if you're watching this video and your life is changed because of some random thing I said, or because of some teaching, or maybe because of just reading the scriptures along with me while I read them, and you're given a better and different revelation that changes your life profoundly. That has nothing to do with me. That has to do with you. But if it does happen to you, then you have something that you can share with me and other people that believe, that you might be able to raise their awareness and bring their righteousness to a new level and draw them closer to the Father, because you were given this revelation and you shared it with others. The problem is if you don't have it, you can't share it. And if you have it and don't share it, then you're not enlarging anybody. Paul's like, I'm trying to make you guys better believers, so that way you can bless me with insight and instruction and wisdom that I don't have. The stronger any one of us is, the stronger the entire group is. The stronger you are, the stronger I am. Not because I get to claim your labors or your works as my own. I get a glory somehow in the things that you've accomplished through the Holy Spirit. No, I benefit because you get to share that wisdom with me, and it makes me wiser. And that's what Paul's saying about him. He's like, you guys are working, you're accomplishing things. I don't want to put those things under my name and take them out from underneath yours. But what I would like to do is the benefit of the wisdom that you've gained from growing this far. And I get benefit from the wisdom because you can share with me the things you've learned, and maybe they don't pertain to me. Maybe they won't change my life, but I can carry those things to somebody else, and maybe it'll change theirs. See, we enlarge the body of believers by just becoming better believers ourselves. And that's all Paul's trying to do. He's just trying to raise the bar a little bit at a time. And so as he's addressing the issues that have sprung up within this body of believers at Corinth, he's making it very clear that his desire isn't to push anybody down or to pick anybody up. His desire is to speak the truth, tell people what they need to hear, and hope that they grow so that the overall body of believers is benefited by the wisdom and everything that's gained from that. And I think that's a pretty strong and good and healthy motivation for just being a good believer that has good teaching and is willing to share the things that we know. So I'm on board. I hope you are too. If we're going to conclude with that, but I will say that if you are going to be around Facebook tomorrow morning at 11 a.m., I encourage you to go to Shalom Ministries, watch the live broadcast. There'll be an opportunity to discuss the things that were brought up in this video, as well as sometimes random other subjects, questions that people ask. We can discuss anything really, but I try to focus on the Bible teaching, but if there's nothing there, we can talk about anything. So hopefully we'll see you on Shabbat at 11 a.m.